Track day crash avoidance common mistakes. Hey, welcome back to JK Moto Entertainment Channel. Welcome back once again to Stable B, our favorite place, or at least one of our favorite places. I think realistically, I definitely enjoy Stable B here. I got all my bikes with me. I got all my tools. This is where I do all my work, and this is where a lot of the magic happens. This is where all these videos are filmed. But one of my other favorite places is the racetrack. One in particular, probably the Ridge Motorsports Park. If you didn't know, if you don't know me, that one's my favorite. But just the racetrack in general, I love being out there. Unfortunately, right now, it's still kind of that off-season time, and we're warming up, we're getting ready. You know, MotoGP's right around the corner, everything's right around the corner, and we'll get back to track days and a little bit of racing this year, so looking forward to that. But today, unfortunately, somewhat unfortunately, we're stuck here in Stable B, so we're gonna talk about track day crashes. Again, this is probably about the third time we've talked about them. I talked about how likely you are to crash and the kind of statistics with that. That was kind of cool to get some real world statistics. I'll link that video up here, so check it out. And then I talked about how to respond to that. So what you do after you crash and how you get yourself and your bike back on the track and everything that's gonna happen in between bikes down and bikes back up at the start grid ready to go. I had that linked also. But today we're going to talk about how to prevent the crash in the first place, right? So we talked about the likelihood of you crashing, we talked about how to respond to it if you do. Now we're going to talk about how to just make it not happen, because crashing is definitely not any fun. No one really wants to do it. If you do want to do it, I would realign a little bit your priorities, and if you can't figure that out, don't come to a track day that I'm at, because I don't really want people at my track days that want to crash. Now, we understand it's going to happen. There's sometimes you can't do a whole lot to prevent it, but there are a lot of things you can do to help prevent it and to at least make it a little easier. And then, as we talked about in the after you crash thing, make it so that when you do put the bike down, you actually learn something from it. So that's what we're going to get into today. Let's go ahead and get into it. Thanks for being here. Before we get into it, I do have to ask that you subscribe to the channel. And then while you're down there, you might as well throw a like on the video. And then, please, to all my track day junkies, my club racers, those of you that have way more experience than me and than most of the audience, please throw your feedback and comments down in the comment section. Anything that I'm missing today throughout the video, I'd ask that you listen carefully and add to it or correct me on anything. I can definitely make mistakes. I'm not the end-all be-all. I'm just here spreading my opinions out on the internet. So I want yours also. Please throw them down in the comments. Let's get into how to prevent a track day crash. When life gets you down, drag a knee on the ground. It's a sweet shirt. We'll have a link down there. I don't know where it links. I'm sorry. Before I edit, while I'm filming these, I have no idea where the links actually pop up. Pretty good about the video ones. Those pop up here, but I don't know exactly where the shirts will link. But there'll be a link for the shirt. Anyway, before we dive into how to prevent a track day crash, we got to talk about like what causes the track day crashes. And the beginning of that is just going to be the fact that realistically, motorcycling is inherently a dangerous sport, and that's just kind of a fact. Out on the road, I would argue it's a little more dangerous than on the track. Statistics, there aren't enough statistics around like track days for a motorcycle to actually pull statistics on street riding versus a track riding and which one has more crashes. But when you're out on a track, doing a track day on a motorcycle, or even racing, you're with like-minded people doing similar things, and you all have the same goal, which is to go fast in the same direction around a racetrack. Obviously, the goal is to be faster than everyone else, at least for racing. On a track day, I don't think that should necessarily be your goal. You should just be trying to improve your own riding. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later, but inherently, there is some risk with riding a motorcycle at a racetrack. You only have two wheels. Sorry, right there. There's the other one. There's one, and there's two. Oh, you only have two wheels. To go faster, you need more speed. The more speed you carry, the more lean angle you carry, or need to carry to take the turn at the same speed. And then the more lean angle you have, the more risk you have. Everyone kind of knows that. There's the whole 100 points of grip discussion, and lean angle takes away points of grip, speed takes away points of grip, and all those different things. So inherently, this is a dangerous sport. A crash is likely to happen. What we're going to get into today is how to prevent that from happening, or how to at least minimize the amount of times it does happen. Because the worst thing is that you go to a track day, and if you're just crashing every track day, one, you're not going to have fun, you're probably going to get out of the sport. Two, your likelihood of ending up injured, or yeah, we'll just stick with injured, severely injured, goes up, and then the likelihood of you totaling a motorcycle, not being able to ride it anymore and have to buy a new one, or just constantly doing repairs and the cost, and all of that ends up realistically with you not doing track days anymore. And that hurts me as much as it hurts you, because the less people that do track days, the less likely tracks are and organizations are to hold track days, and then the sport just dies away. So we can't have that. So we're going to talk about how to prevent that. The other thing that kind of helps lead to track day crashes is the fact that most of us anyway, do in fact want to go fast, and we want to get faster. And I'm going to point out the fact that this channel, JK Moto Entertainment, this business is mostly focused around track days and not as much club racing, but we do a little bit of club racing content here and there. If you want to go even faster and you've only done track days up to this point, get on the grid. Just start racing. And I've been told that from someone else, and then I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it through other people. If you want to get faster, actually, start racing. That's where the speed actually belongs. But moving away from that, we're not here to talk about that today. Track days, generally, everyone wants to go fast. I mean, you bought a 200 horsepower or 200 plus horsepower sport bike, you want to do 180 down the front straight. That's the whole point. You're like, well, Easton, you told me to get off the freeway, get on the racetrack, and go fast. Isn't that where I can do it? Yes, absolutely. But also conveniently, most track day crashes don't happen on the front straight. Outside of some mechanical errors that cause brake failure at the end of the straight, most of them are going to happen in other places, and we'll talk about that also. But those are kind of what leads to it, right? You get the high-risk environment, being on a racetrack on a motorcycle. This just generally has an amount of risk to it. The lower, we'll say medium to low rider skill level. Some people are coming having never ridden before. Some people you've been riding for 10, 15 years before you do your first track day. I got that. But when it comes to skill level on a racetrack, generally a track day is going to have a lower skill level compared to, let's say, anyone racing in Moto America, World Superbike, or even up to MotoGP, obviously. We're not at those guys' level. So we'll say relatively low rider skill level. And then just the overall, like, man, I want to go fast. I want to go fast. I want to get faster. I want to be faster in corners. I want to be faster on the straights. I want to just ride this bike fast. I want to race one day maybe, or whatever your reasoning is. You want to be fast. And so all of those things are what kind of set up this environment for a pretty easy to happen crash. But as we mentioned in the beginning, crashes can eventually, and sometimes not even eventually, sometimes right away, lead to very bad scenarios. So we don't want to be in those scenarios, so let's get into how to prevent them in the first place. First topic to cover, and this is going to be kind of the major one, is going to be common mistakes that lead to crashes. And both through my experience, and if you Google it, if you talk to anyone, most of your crashes are going to happen either on corner entry or corner exit. You can even see that if you're watching professional racing. Generally, that's where that happens. There's a couple of high-speed offs in other places, but the corners are the hardest part, right? The person that rides the corners the best or figures it out, carries the most speed, or anyway, is generally going to be the guy that's the fastest out there, so everyone's trying to figure out how to make those corners a little bit better. And due to that, that's where we see our most crashes. It's pretty easy, I would say, to ride a motorcycle fast in a straight line, and then to brake in a straight line. Once you start adding that lean, as we mentioned, the 100 points of grip start to be given away to your lean angle. And so you lose a little bit of that grip for your braking, a little bit of that grip for your acceleration. So corner entry, corner exits are where we're going to see a lot of our crashes. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is I am not a rider coach, and I'm not a professional racer, and I don't have a huge, awesome, what do they call that, resume to show you guys on why you should listen to me on how to prevent crashes. So I'm not here to give you like riding tips today. What I am here to give you is just some standard rider-to-rider advice to help you out with preventing a crash on the racetrack. And I want to be very clear about that because I don't want to have someone misjudging what this is supposed to be. Like I said, I'm not a coach. But I think the rider-to-rider advice can go a long ways. And so the first advice I'm going to give you is to get some coaching, right? Generally, some coaching is going to help you out. Be careful about your coach selection. Make sure you're picking the right coach and you're not just wasting some money on a random guy that isn't necessarily the best coach. He might be great at riding, might not be the best coach. So careful with your coaches, pick the right coach, and then go listen to your coach. But beyond that, some of you might not do that. Some of you might not have the money for that. Some of you might think you're good to go. So this video is just here to give you some advice outside of actual coaching tips, right? So corner entry, corner exit. We know that that's where they most happen, so that's where we need to be paying the most attention. Once again, it's very easy to ride a bike in a straight line. Once you start to dip that bike into a corner, and then you're in the corner, and then you're pulling that bike back out of the corner, you're trying to get on that gas fast, that's when we start to see our mistakes. So my advice there is, once again, a little bit of that coaching. But the big advice that I have is to remember in the back of your head at all times that this is just a track day. And no matter how great you are, you're most likely not going to set a lap record. And even if you did set a lap record, it most likely won't be recorded anywhere because they're not going to trust your lap timer. You have to have an official transponder of some sort to get a lap record like that. So no matter how fast you are, even you guys crazy up there in A group that are probably watching this video and already clicked away from it and didn't leave me any advice, please leave your advice down below also. You're not going to set a lap record on a track day. That's number one, right? It's not going to be there. So a track day, even for a professional racer, a guy that might be racing Moto America, maybe privateering or whatever else, if you are at a public track day, you're not there to go 100%. You shouldn't be, and you should keep that in mind. Now, you can continue to gain speed and continue to gain confidence and get faster and faster and faster, and it's a great time to practice. And so I don't want to say just go out there and do 50% the whole time and never make any progress, but understand that your progress needs to be a little bit more careful than you would on maybe a not public track day, because it is a public track day. Some people out there are brand new, and all those other reasons that we talked about already, right? So biggest advice I have is keep in mind this is just a track day, and the worst thing you can do is end yourself up in the hospital with a bike that's not rideable anymore, and then, like I said, quit the sport. So that kind of leads to one of the biggest mistakes that we see, which is overconfidence, right? A lot of people come in and they go nuts. They think they know it. They've been out in the canyons going crazy for years. They're, canyon carving every weekend. They're amazing. They drag their knee on every single clover leaf on the U.S. highway and everything else. And they come into a track day and they have this overconfidence, and they shove it way too hard into like turn 2 on their second lap, and they bin it. And that's what we see. So no matter what your skill level is, no matter how long you've been riding, respect the track, respect the bike, respect the conditions also. That's the next thing we need to talk about is different conditions. But you got to respect all of those things and keep yourself in check and understand that you're there to make improvements, you're there to push, but you don't have to push straight to what you think 100% is right away. If you hold back a little bit and make a gradual push, you can make it a lot further that way. And the next point with that kind of like holding back on the push is that a lot of times, and if you get some coaching, you'll probably be told this, but a lot of times when we try and progress the entire track every single lap. If you go out there every session, every lap, trying to work corners 1 through 10, you're not going to make very good improvements. Now, if you go out every session with a goal of I'm going to work corner 6, let's say, and you go out and you focus, you should still be riding the line in all the other corners, and you should still be doing everything else right, and you can still make little improvements here and there. But corner 6, you want to focus on, right? And so you say, corner 6 is where I'm working today. I'm going to work on my braking marker, I'm going to work on sticking to the apex, then I'm going to work on my exit speed or my exit point or whatever it might be, and I'm going to work on smooth throttle application, right? You want to pick something to work on. That'll help keep yourself focused. If you're just out there like, I want to make a faster lap time, that's when you're going to make a push in the wrong place at the wrong time and make a mistake and put your bike down. That's what I've done personally. On my Gixxer, I told this story a couple videos ago, but I just set a pretty good lap time for myself, and I wanted to make it better. And halfway through the corner, I was like, I can get more speed, and I kept adding more and more and more until the bike gave up, and I found out that nope, I couldn't add more speed there, right? So you want to make that decision beforehand. You want to say, hey, I want to try to carry this much speed into it. I want to have my braking marker at this point, and I want to focus on making sure I hit my brake at the right time and I enter my corner at the right place, right? And generally, speedometers, I think, can be a little bit of a distraction. You shouldn't be looking at your speedometer. You should be looking at the track. That's where you want to be. So anyway, I'll leave that tip out of there, but just kind of hold that one in the back of your head. To get back to it, when you get out on the racetrack, if you want to make an improvement, you need to pick beforehand where you're going to make the improvement. If you don't pick what you're going to work on, you're not going to make any progress. You're not going to work on anything. It's not going to work. So get out there and say, hey, this session, I'm working on corner 3, and I'm going to work on my corner entry and my corner exit, or even just one or the other, right? Maybe your entry is amazing. Maybe you're good on the brakes. You pass people there all the time, whatever it might be. That corner exit is where you need to work. You just don't have that drive coming out. So work on that. And the rest of the corners, like I said, hit your braking markers decent, hit your race lines decent, come back around while you're on the front straight. Takes a second to think, but like, how was that last time? Or really, you can kind of think about it the rest of the time. Get back to corner 3 and work on it again, right? And so pick something to work on. That'll kind of help with the focus while you're out there. All right, the next topic that we're going to talk about is, honestly, a lot of these are so related that they're not necessarily individual topics, but this one's going to be track etiquette, and it all kind of goes back to the same thing, honestly, and it's something I already mentioned, which is just remembering that this is just a track day. And you'll hear that at your riders meeting in the morning, you'll hear it from other random people. If you're a young guy, it might get annoying, you might get the whole like, yeah, it's just all these old guys out here saying it's just a track day, but to me it's more, but it is true. I'm a young guy myself, it is just a track day. If you're out racing, and especially like even club racing, it's not really worth it. Remember, this is a hobby at the end of the day, and I don't mean to make this video dark, but you shouldn't be throwing your life away for a couple minutes on a racetrack. We'll put it that way, and we'll leave it at that. Crashes don't always have to lead to that. Sometimes it's just some extra duct tape on the bike, or a bent rim, or you gotta buy a couple new parts, and so it's not always a big deal. And I don't want to say that you should never crash a bike, and that, you know, if you crash, it's the end of the world. It's not what I'm trying to get at. But you can learn a lot more with more time on the track. And if you're spending your time on the track crashing, you're not spending time on the track. So that's why I think it's super important to try and get the most out there while we're out there. But a lot of that comes from that just track etiquette, right? Remembering that it is a track day, not only for you, but for everyone else. And having that kind of respect for the other riders that are out there, making sure your passes are clean. Once you get into racing, you can kind of start to get a little bit more interesting with the passes. You still shouldn't cut people off and go crazy, but you can pass people a little more aggressively in the middle of a turn. You can outbrake and pass them on the inside as you're going in. You can do different things like that, right? And that's allowed. In a track day scenario, especially down in the B and C groups, maybe in the A group they don't have any rules, but in the B and C groups you want to have that respect for everyone else out there, and understand that you might not know what level they're at, and you don't want to throw them off. Now, on the contrary to that, if you are not at the moment where you're passing people yet, you got to be ready for people to pass you. And that is something I think doesn't get talked about a whole lot. We kind of rely on these rules of passing in the track days. And so this portion is going to be for my new riders coming out. It's your first, maybe second track day. You're still a little uncomfortable out there, maybe a little slow, you know, relatively to everyone else. I hate to use the word, but you're a little slow. Just be honest with yourself. You know, you've got slower lap times or longer lap times, and you can get passed. Now, as I just mentioned to all the other riders, it's their job to make sure they pass at your comfort level, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes they misjudge your comfort level, or they just go based off what their comfort level is or what they thought it would be, and they just pass you, and it's not comfortable, and that can throw you off. So I bring this up because I think that it doesn't always cause a crash. Sometimes we're perfectly fine, but it is something we need to be ready for and aware of, right? And that is other riders on the track. So, and that goes both directions. Being ready for someone to pass you. You shouldn't be out there being scared. You should be relaxed, calm, conservative, but you should always be able to, especially on a track day, you shouldn't be riding so close to the limit that you can't make a quick adjustment. And I say that very cautiously because quick adjustments are scary. Everything should be smooth. That'll be the next point that we cover, is just being smooth. But you should be ready to make an adjustment at all times, right? And that could be you're coming through a turn and there's something in the middle of the track on the race line that just fell off the bike in front of you. Maybe the bike in front of you puts his bike down. You don't want to follow him with your eyes. You want to keep going, right? Or maybe someone passes you on the inside when you weren't expecting it. As you're coming into a corner, you got to be ready for those types of things. That's part of just kind of being aware, being proactive in your riding, and being very cognizant of what's going on, okay? So being able to make quick adjustments, I'd say that's a great tip for preventing a track day crash. So other things for track day etiquette, you know, obey the flags, all of that kind of stuff. I really think that's about it. Besides just having respect for the track, you know, if it's wet or if it's windy or if it's cold in the morning, or if you're a little tired because it's your third track day in a row, or whatever those conditions might be, just having an actual realization of what's going on and not trying to like get yourself in some scenario where you think everything's perfect. That doesn't usually lead to good, for lack of better terms. Anyway, all right, so now we're gonna talk about my cliff analogy and how I think that applies and how it can help. Okay, so my cliff analogy is that every motorcycle, every rider, you know, we'll just say you, in your track day motorcycle career, there is a cliff. And that cliff is the edge of grip. That cliff is a crash, right? A track day crash. And the severity of the cliff is not what we're going to talk about. You know, it could be a 3-foot cliff that you just fall off of. It could be 500 foot. We're not going to talk about that part. What we are going to talk about is your approach to the cliff. And I like this analogy because I believe that when you first start out riding, you know, you might be 200 feet away from the cliff and you have your cliff here. And as you get close to that cliff, you get close to the edge of traction. Once you fall off the cliff, obviously you lost all your traction and you crashed. We don't want to do that. But we do want to ride, you know, this is the fastest place to be, is right on the edge of this cliff at all times. But if we just rush over here right away, what we're going to do is ride straight off the edge and we're going to miss everything that was in between it. There's details in there. There's all the scenery of that cliff right there where you learn, you know, it's hard to analogize. I think I used that word the other day. I don't think it's a real word, but analogize that back. But anyway, the slower you can move through this portion, especially that last 10 to 20% of the edge of the cliff, the more you'll pick up on what is actually there, right? If you rush through it, you're not going to see what's there. If you kind of slowly get through it, you're going to have a lot better idea of what you're doing and what caused your crash, right? And so that's the biggest thing, and I talked about this in the other videos, but you want to learn from that crash. You want to get back out there and say, okay, this is what caused the crash. This is how I can prevent it next time. This is what I did wrong. This is how I can make sure I don't do that, or this is how I can make this adjustment. You want to learn from that crash, right? And so one of the ways to prevent the crash is to take a very slow approach. And the easiest way I've found to do that is to, 1, not be overconfident, 2, don't just be sending it, and then 3, smooth. Smooth, smooth, smooth. We've all heard the analogy, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and so slow is fast. I don't necessarily agree with that because I think the slow is slow and fast is fast, and we shouldn't mix those two things up. But smooth is important, especially on a motorcycle. The more smooth you are, the more fluid you are, the more the bike doesn't get jostled around. You don't upset your suspension, you don't bump your tires on and off the ground, you don't make sudden adjustments, and you won't throw yourself off or throw the bike off. So having that smooth brake application, a smooth throttle application, smoothly letting off the throttle, smoothly grabbing some brakes. And you can do that. I don't mean to like be out there and just going so slow and like having this like slow dance maneuver, but you want a smooth dance to it, right? There is a dance, there's an art to riding motorcycles, and you want to be smooth with everything. You can be smooth and fast, once again, which is why I don't believe in the slow is smooth, smooth is fast thing. You can be smooth and fast, but you have to be smooth out on the racetrack. All right, we just got done talking about being smooth. We talked about track day, like kind of etiquette or track etiquette. We talked about respecting the track, and the last thing we're going to talk about is respecting the safety, which is, it goes twofold. One is like if a crash does happen, which it can, and it probably will at some point. I think you can make it quite a ways into this career without doing it. At some point you will probably make a mistake, and that's okay. So first thing I'm going to say is make sure you have proper safety gear. Usually at your track days, obviously it's required, but you should also be keeping an eye on it, making sure there aren't actually any big holes, making sure your helmet is in date and doesn't have any cracks or scratches on it that it shouldn't. And you just make sure your gear's in check so that on the day that it does happen, you're ready for it. But the other thing is the bike, right? We have a bike back here. This amazing machine is supposed to keep us safe, supposed to keep us going around the racetrack, but we want to make sure that it's going to be able to do that. So you shouldn't be going out with faulty brakes. You shouldn't be going out with rusty chains. You shouldn't be going out with anything on the bike that could cause a problem out there. You want to take that part of the gamble out of it, right? That part of the equation should be gone. That shouldn't even be in there. When we line up for adding up the different possibilities that lead to a crash, you should hit improper bike care, should be a 0, big fat 0 there. Everything on the bike mechanically needs to be working well, and that's going to help prevent the crash, honestly, quite a bit. But also it's going to help that if a crash does happen, or when a crash does happen, that you know that it was a mistake that you made. And that's the next thing, and the last thing we have to talk about is being honest with yourself and knowing that the majority of us that are doing just track days or even club racing are not professional racers. And we are not perfect at this sport, and we do not know everything. So, you know, I had a discussion with a gentleman named Antley Terry on a recent JK Moto podcast episode. You should go check that out. Also, we'll have that linked. But that discussion was just kind of talked about, you know, that he's a big believer in you don't have to crash a motorcycle at all on the racetrack. I said, I don't like that because we can't preach that because we see the top guys crashing all the time. Now, the conversation that happened after that was the fact that those top guys are crashing all the time because they are riding at 100% and they have new bikes coming all the time and they need to find the new 100% on that bike. And to do that, they are going to go over the edge of that cliff. Watch most of their riding and realize that most of the time they're not just spending their entire time crashing, they're riding right at or very near the edge of that cliff and studying all of it so they know exactly where it is. And when they do go over, they know exactly what little patch of sand was there in that cliff that they can mark down and say, okay, this bike cannot do this anymore. They have all the data and all the analytics and everything else to figure that out for them. We don't have that, and we are also not at that level. So the last part about preventing a track day crash is understanding and accepting the fact that if a crash has happened or does happen, it is probably most likely you. And so at the end of the day, when you go out and you ride, you need to remember that it is your input that would cause the bike to go down. Whether or not your tires are cold, the track is wet, there's a chain in the middle of it, maybe that portion of the track was shady, whatever else, you have all that information and you have to make the decisions out there. The bike's not gonna ride itself. So please keep that in mind. Hopefully a couple of these tips help you guys out, or helped you guys out while you're out there doing your track day riding and your club racing. Once again, get some coaching, be aware of your surroundings, apply the respect to the sport that it deserves, and remember that it is all you. Maybe take a second, slow down, stay focused. When I say slow down, I don't necessarily mean slow down your riding, I mean slow down. Stay focused. We mentioned that the easiest way I think to do that is to pick a corner to focus on. Focus on that corner. That'll help your mind kind of stay active. And then make sure your bike is good to go so you can delete that from the equation. And then make sure your suit and your helmet and your boots and all of your safety gear is in fact going to be safety gear to keep you safe, so that when it does happen, or if it does happen, you can stay safe out there. So hopefully these tips helped a little bit. Sorry if I was rambling. I do think it's possible to run track days and racing without crashing, especially without crashing every weekend. And I think these are some tips that can help. Once again, I do ask all my club racers, my track day junkies, and everyone else that has experience to throw your tips down in the comments as well, so we can get a nice conglomerate of different ideas from different people. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.